The Monday Mornings podcast is presented by Southern Michigan Bank and Trust, continuous banking since 1872. Switch today and visit smb-t.com.
Matt, you've made a career out of education and coaching in athletics. I think it's crazy that your best friend was in the exact same field that you were in, that you guys competed for the same job.
He actually got out of the field and he works for, used to be steering gear. He works for General Motors.
Oh, no kidding.
He completely got out of education.
Oh my gosh. Yep. Well, I guess that goes back to where I'm at, because I think a lot of people have left education. It's a tricky mix that you guys balance well. How do you continue to grow as a leader, and where do you seek out opportunities to just continue evolving as a leader?
I think I have a growth mindset. I really do. I think I'm, it'd be easy to say I'm not going to disclose my age, but but I'm 50,
we figured
57
it out.
Or whatever. Mm-hmm. I'm not. I don't want to be that guy. I want to grow. I mean, I think like with regards to technology and being innovative and things that are out there, to continue to look to improve and get better.
You ever think about
change with times?
You ever think about consulting? I mean, I think I look at your blueprint for, and you talked about the social media. You were the first guy. You were always the first guy to adapt to some of that stuff and making sure that the school's news was out there on social. Nice. Do you ever think about doing any consulting? I mean, you have a pretty nice playbook, I would say.
I mean, I retired. But I did retire. I retired at the end of last school year as a teacher. So then I came back and I was hired back as athletic director, stayed on as athletic director. So it's been a great gig. So, you get to that. But I like what I do, too. Yeah.
You've got your youngest going through high school right now, and she's having a great time. And it is your youngest. Yeah.
But I got a nephew that's in ninth grade or eighth grade, and I got a great relationship with him.
Yeah. As parents of high school students, how should we as parents? What's the way to get the best out of those 4 years for your family and your kids?
Be involved. It doesn't have to be sports,
right?
Be in the band. If you're robotics, do it all. Because I said this long ago, and I learned this, and I see even kids that I've had, years ago. The kids that burn the candle at both ends, they leave basketball practice to go to this or even community service, outside groups, church groups, etc. The kids that burn the candle at both ends, those are the kids that are successful right now in life. Yeah. Mm-hmm. They really are. They know how to manage their time. Yeah. And I think do it all. Be involved in student council. Be involved in everything. Mm-hmm. Kids that are complacent, I don't want to do. No, that's I always tell the story about my son. He played in middle school. He was a little guy, so he didn't really play very much in middle school. He ran into plays, whatever. 8th grade, he started kind of. You could see it. Well, Coach Clark and Coach Williamson at that time were doing some stuff with football, and he says to Kathy and I, I don't think I'm going to play football. And Kathy goes, no, it's fine. She says, we have a championship cross country program, Coach Jordan, and you're not going to not do nothing.
Right.
That was her words,
Yeah.
So she dropped him off to running club to Coach Jordan, and he ran 5 miles or whatever. So I picked him up. I got in the car. I said, how'd it go? He says, I'm playing football. and he played 4 years in high school, and he had a good career. Yeah. But then he went and played 4 years at Kalamazoo.
Wow.
And
that's someone who wasn't going to play.
And had like 12 catches in his whole career, 2 touchdowns, both against Albion.
That's all right.
And,
that's good.
And a funny story about the first one. Ever tell you that? Mm-mm. So I'm with my father-in-law. Kathy's coaching, so she's not there. And Brett was barely seeing the field. And so it's halftime, and we go out, and we tailgated just like we did at Michigan games.
Absolutely.
It was the way to go, So my father-in-law was like, what do you think, And I want to have one more. And he says, sure. And all of a sudden we waited. The second half starts. All of a sudden my phone blows up.
No.
Oh my God! Congratulations, Brett! Awesome!
Shut up.
You're in the parking lot.
And I'm in the parking lot. I look at my father-in-law. I'm like, oh no! His first catch of his career, he caught it and went 71 yards for a touchdown
Stop
on his
it.
first catch
That's
of his
amazing.
college career.
And you
we
missed
were
it.
not in the stadium. We
Unbelievable.
were in the parking lot.
Oh my God.
And for 1 year, nobody knew it.
Really?
We didn't tell anybody.
Oh, I wouldn't.
bet.
I never would have.
We ended up seeing it because he sent saw a huddle, after the fact. I saw
Right.
the play. Nobody knew that, and we couldn't,
You fessed up?
couldn't fess up. Couldn't handle the game.
Oh, my God.
father-in-law, and it was so funny.
Oh.
And then his second one, my father-in-law actually was in the restroom, and all of a sudden on the loudspeaker, touchdown,
Stop
Brett
it.
Lehman, and he goes.
You gotta be shitting me.
He missed them both, and he was there and missed them
Unbelievable.
both. So that was our funny story about that. But he stuck it out, and I remember probably 2 years in, he says, "Dad," he goes, I don't know," and I said, "Listen," I said, "you do what you got to do." I said, I said, "Here's the thing. Here's my advice. If you finish this, think about how that looks.
Yeah.
If you get a job and they see that you played 4 years at Kalamazoo College, that doesn't mean you might have been, on the practice squad.
Yeah.
But you for 4 years,
Yes.
you consistently went to practice
Yes.
and graduated from that university in those 4 years and
Yep.
did that. They're going to put you to the top of the. They're going to put you to the top of the pile when it comes to getting a job.
Kerwin always says he's the most successful 2.45 college graduate in history, and it was all because he played college
Exactly.
football.
But
It gave him
it's
early opportunities.
My brother is a retired professor at Central Michigan, and he talked to me. He goes, "I don't know how college athletes do it.
Yeah.
It's a
Especially
full-time job.
It's
It
a
really
full-time
is.
job.
Yeah.
It's really hard. So so to be able to manage your time.
Yeah.
So again, it goes back to your question about what your kids.
Yeah.
Soak it all in. Do it all.
Yeah.
And don't make it. I think sometimes the reason why kids don't is it's an inconvenience for parents.
That's true.
And that's and I get it. It's a long
They
day.
can figure something out.
But you got to
though.
figure it out.
Yeah.
And I think because that is the best time of their lives.
You only get
Yeah.
one shot at
They only
it.
got one shot.
Yeah.
At it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, go ahead. You
Well, I
ask,
was-
ask the hard question.
Well, actually, I was just going to apologize on behalf of all parents that just think their kids are the best, brightest, can do no wrong,
Well,
and that you need to hear our thoughts and our feelings and everything. So I want to apologize on behalf of those parents. And cancel
School?
Right? I would never. I would never. But I'm also I'm a little older than most of the parents my kids'
Sure.
age, and I know the administrators and coaches are getting lots of phone calls. So if you could speak to the parents without any recourse whatsoever, what would you say to them?
With regards to
Let's think about the
Why is my kid not
ill behaving or poor practice parents
Any
that
treat. Yeah, just
we've got out there
just
that are
the-
mistreating our educators.
the in general problem, I would say maybe where kids aren't doing anything wrong. They're not doing anything wrong, and parents want to call you and let you know that
kind of the play my kid and the 4 best players.
Yes.
or throw the ball out of bounds.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you deal with that? And if you could, like Jennifer said, if you could just speak without any,
Like, how could parents be better than some of the trends that we're seeing right now?
Well, I think they're missing out on putting things in perspective. It goes back to, I think when I was a coach, and this is what I felt as a coach. It's easy to have your guys or girls that play. It's easy for them to have a good experience. They're playing all the time.
Sure.
But how do you make it so your kids that are not have a good experience? How do you make it so the kids that don't play as much?
Right.
How do you make sure they have a good experience? That's a challenge. That's
Yeah.
to me a challenge for any coach because they sometimes can be forgotten about and whatever. So I think it's about value in team and value
Yes.
and trying to the kids that like in any team, the kids that maybe don't play, that they're part of this. They're the ones that go against these kids in practice, and they may some kids start the year, and maybe they just it comes down to the Jimmies and Joes. You got to have talent, you really do, and some kids are just more talented than others.
Yeah.
But then you see kids that may work from a position where they don't play at all, and now they're playing 6-8 minutes a game.
Yep.
And you reward that and you speak on that. I think that's it's because those kids that start there want to be in that group where they're the guys or the girls.
Right.
If you're not playing, you aspire to be somebody that can contribute. So it's just that trying to work hard. And I think if you got great attitude and great effort, I think those things will take care of themselves. I truly believe that. We got a couple kids on the basketball team that I just watched that. I watched him, without saying his name. I watched him as a freshman. I'm going,
Yeah.
And then now it's like he's going in and giving us just phenomenal minutes during our playoff run. And he doesn't make a lot of mistakes. Plays within himself, rebounds, plays strong, plays good defense.
Nice.
And might not show up a lot in the book, but if you're a coach and you put your coaching eyes on it, you see that, you reward that.
Yep.
That's you can't win without guys like that because they're challenging your guys in practice.
Continuing to speak to those parents, it can be detrimental if you have a coach that plays favorites. What happens to a program if something like that does happen?
I think your numbers go down. I think kids just won't come out. They see that. Yeah.
In future years?
I think so. I think that's the case. And you have to, there's kind of two schools. First of all, you can't have favorites. But I think it's natural. It's natural for coaches to have favorites. Let's be honest.
Drawn to them. Mm-hmm.
And I think it's like, what are the characteristics of the kids that are your favorites? Okay? And it's kids that have great attitude, great work ethic.
Yep.
Show up early, stay after. That's that. Because, without saying you play favorites.
Yeah.
But those are your favorites, and I think you have to. Everybody become your favorite if you do those things.
Yeah.
So, that's my 2 cents. But
we got to encourage.
Easier said than done.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. But I think it's awesome what you guys have done there, and you guys have been able to do it in so many different sports too. I know we've kind of just talked a little bit about basketball. Let's talk a little bit about, and you can go into this as much as you want or as little as you want. I am ignorant when it comes to the Department of Education and what all is going on, and of course you see all this stuff on social media. From your seat, what's impacted, what's going on, what's your take?
Well, my take is, you got people making decisions that don't know what the hell they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, from a standpoint of, if you're not an educator and you're not living in an educator's world, in their shoes, whatever, and you're from the outside looking in, you really don't know what you're talking about. You don't know. So anytime somebody gets put in charge of something that hasn't been in the classroom, I see that a lot in a lot of things.
Even like admins who have never been in the classroom.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, so you don't because what teachers are doing now is, you're worrying about, you got kids that come to school that may not have eaten, have had breakfast and lunch, and the 3 meals that they get during the day might be the only 3 good ones they get during the day.
That's it. So
you're talking about we're gonna cut programs like that. It's just people that don't know what they're talking about. And I think it's, and I feel pretty strong about that.
Sure.
I think, I don't want to get politicky,
right.
but I do. It's like, if you look at, especially early elementary, those teachers are incredible.
Right.
Yeah.
What they have to deal with, what's coming in, and a lot of times, and sometimes the parenting is different. It really is.
Yes.
And for a lot of reasons. You could say, you always hear discussion about, there's, years ago, it was a one parent household and one parent working. Now it's different.
Mm-hmm.
Both parents
are
work.
working.
So it's a different dynamic than we've ever had. But you can still make it certainly work. And so I just feel like, we're seeing that more in schools, where teachers are really parenting kids, and you're dealing with, you're dealing with all things. And I think that when you start talking about cutting those types of programs, to me, it's just like, man, you just don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I think, to be honest with you, you should throw money at early education. You should have, getting kids in Head Start programs to get them to be able to read, and encouraging parents to, actually educating parents. Read to your kid.
Yeah.
Do you read to your kid every night?
Yeah.
Research says that, your test scores for your kids when you read to them and then they become readers,
Yep.
you know, they flourish as students. So I think that's the thing. I don't, when people talk about, you know, it's like, you know, when they don't know if they've never lived in that world,
Yeah.
and then they start thinking they have to make decisions about that world, that's my problem. Now, if the leader of education was somebody that was a teacher, an educator, been in the classroom and
Yeah.
whatever, okay.
Yeah.
But for somebody to be on the outside, like, no,
Yeah.
I don't think you really have any idea what you're talking about. Come spend a week with us and go down in second grade or first grade and really see.
Yep.
You know, and we got, you know, people would die for the problems at Concord. I can't
Well, I was
imagine.
going to say, like, let's talk a big district,
some
right?
areas, you know, it's.
Let's go to Detroit. Talk about Detroit for a minute.
That's exactly right. You know, and you have all sorts of things. The kids coming in with trauma,
Yeah.
and teachers trying to teach, and so yeah, I get fired up sometimes on that kind of stuff.
Well, I mean, how difficult is it for some of those teachers to actually teach when you're going over the rules every single day and making sure that kids are fed and you know, dealing with God knows what at home.
Exactly.
It's hard. How do you begin the teaching
so
process?
you're really having you're fighting a battle that
Yeah.
it's different expectations.
Well, the
Right.
teachers have to be everything in
They do.
that 7 or 8 hours that they have access to that child.
No,
And
it's like I said, it's an underappreciated profession, and I think because it's underappreciated a little bit at times, I think that's why we're struggling to find teachers.
let's
It's
talk
kind of
about
like
that.
officiating.
Yeah.
You know, nobody. I mean, seriously.
Right,
You know?
yeah, no one wants
so
to
you
do
don't
it.
make you don't make a great salary. I mean, it's
Right.
getting better. I think it
Yeah.
was, and so
It's like, you know, could I officiate? Maybe, but do I want? I don't want Jennifer to yell at me in the stands.
Exactly.
You suck.
yeah. I
You
know.
suck, Stripes.
Go back to Foot Locker.
Hey, that's just it's just an insurance agent. We go to church together.
Yeah, right.
God.
Yeah.
But it is abusive. We turn into animals
Yeah.
because we want the best for our kids.
Oh, I witnessed some animals last night.
Yes, we took in a quarterfinal game last night, and it is amazing the passion. Sometimes we don't show it in the best way, and
Yeah.
maybe you've been guilty of this in the past. I don't know, but when you're watching your own kids, you almost turn into a little bit of a monster if you're not careful.
Matt, would you ever tell a referee that they suck?
No,
No.
not in my role.
Not in your role.
That's
Yeah, but
it.
I don't
You
think
have
it's
to,
in
you
his
have
nature,
to take,
though.
You have to put a lot of things in perspective. So I mean, it's like I can, you know, we played a game earlier in the year, and you know, of course, my kid fouled out with 5 minutes left, and it was a Morenci game, and it was like 3 ticky. I thought, you know, of course, I'm standing next to Coach Rundle, Craig Rundle, who's longtime football. His grandkids go to Concord. It's like I love standing next to him. He's like a wise man, you know, and I'm like I just went straight and came around. We were out in the hallway. We ran into my office.
Right.
I just had to. I didn't want anybody looking down at me saying, "Oh
Right.
my God, Matt just lost his mind."
Right.
Yeah.
I just had to remove myself.
Sure. Yeah.
Get my crap together
Yeah.
before I went back in, and then when I let him in the locker room, man, have safe travels.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's because you have to be professional.
Yes.
You
and,
were not-
and I don't think officials don't screw up on purpose.
No.
God,
and
no.
so it's the
No.
perception of that. And but I get caught up sometimes. Yeah, I'm guilty. I'm better though.
Yeah.
I'm better. But
What advice would you give to a young person that was, I mean, you mentioned you have somebody that's interested in becoming an athletic director. If you've got young kids that are interested in education, what advice would you give them?
well, I think you have to. I would tell them the benefits of it.
Okay.
Because I think we offer a class at Concord. It's actually it's kind of a pre-education class where my wife actually teaches it, and she's at the high school, and she said that a lot of the stuff this is stuff that they did in college when she
Okay.
started there. So these kids are getting. So she works with them, and then now they're in the classroom, and they're in their class, kind of working as classroom aides, working with teachers,
Oh, nice.
working with kids. So they're taking some of these skills that they're learning and taking them in, and so now you got kids that are in helping other kids. So I think it's a great concept. Well, then from that, you show them, you really show them the experience. You really show them what it is and how great it is, and it's not made for everybody. I know, my daughter Lindsay, she had enough credit. She was subbing a lot, and she was really great. She was really good at it. Like she taught, she actually covered for me. I had filled in as principal, and so they backfilled with her. She taught like technology, and
nice.
she's really good at technology. She's like Canvas, doesn't have a teacher's certificate, and our superintendent would have she didn't want to do it. She didn't want to do it. I thought really, you're pretty good. My superintendent would have provided the opportunities and research for her to get her teaching certificate, and she just didn't want to do it. So I think you have to, it has to be for the right, and I think you have to find the right fit. I think for me, like I said, I really liked all 3 buildings.
Yeah.
But I think there's not everybody can be a middle school teacher.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, it's a different animal.
Yeah.
Can't
You
deal
have
with
to
those
be
monsters.
to be tough skins.
I'd get fired.
And you have to be, but you also have to really, I think, have a good sense of humor. I think you can't be, because you'll struggle.
Yeah.
So I think you got to find what you're made for. Elementary, middle school, high school.
Sure.
If a former athlete or a former student comes back and pays you a visit or calls you for some advice, how's that make you feel?
Awesome. Oh man, it's not. I don't think there's anything better. I think it really is. It's people that that you've had. Now I have some kids that are I think I got Josh Risky, Gavin's is his son, and Josh is like one of my favorite dudes of all time. He's coaching at Concord, and I still have a lot of those guys: Tim Mulvaney, Travis Sparks, guys that when I coached. Again, Christopher Torres. Tried to get Christopher's got a daughter on the on our middle school team, and he coached them this year and does a great job. And I sent him information. I said, I think you need to go to this coaching academy.
Yeah.
DCAM does, and I said because he's not staff, but he's got the skills. He's got that soft skills to be a good coach.
Nice.
He can be compassionate. He can be tough, but he can. Yeah. But he's teaching. So it's like I want him to go to this academy because I want him to. So that's the kind of things that relationships you build for me.
Nice.
Oh, that's awesome. If you could change one thing about education right now, what would it be?
Oh man.
The start time of the day.
Oh man, I have to think about that. That's a tough one. One thing.
How about just the reputation or something like that?
Yeah,
overall?
I do. I think that. I think that's what it would be. I think it would be. It's. You can't always look at test scores. You can't look at those things. It's about growing.
Yep.
And a lot of these areas that have higher test scores, they're usually linked to being affluent. To be honest with you.
Yeah.
Social, economic. I mean, kids that come from, schools that have money and parents that have money. Those kids they're afforded opportunities that others are not. Sure. You even see it in ours. I think that that's huge. So I think it's about really understanding. Again, it goes back to what I said. Really understanding what education is, and you can't always put a test score on it.
Yeah.
Some kids it's simply getting them to graduate, and they might we've had kids that they might be the first kid in their family that's graduated from high school. Yeah. Think about that.
That's amazing.
That's something. But think about that in our respect. That's certainly not my goal for my kid.
Yep.
I certainly want to be more, but for some, that's big, because sometimes that families haven't had everybody that's done that. So I think it's just people I wish people understood and put education in perspective and really understood all the ins and outs that you see. I see it from a different lens because I lived it.
Well, as the athletic director, let's talk about some true Concord pride this week. You guys, I think we'll air it a little bit later.
Yeah, this is going to air afterwards.
Yeah, so let's make some predictions and see how.
Let's see how it ages.
I mean,
you guys are heading to the Breslin Center tomorrow
with his daughter.
With your daughter on the team. What time do you guys play?
Play at 5:30.
5:30 tomorrow night.
Yep.
All
And
right.
we just had a Zoom meeting with MHSA to go through because there's a lot to it. We're going to have a meeting afterwards when I get back to
Can
school.
you get a couple of my guys in so I don't have to screw around with some of these passes?
I tell you, I wish. It's like crazy, man.
It is. It's like a life.
It is hard.
Yeah.
It is really hard. And I mean, Like McCoy, he kind of lit the group up. Not us, but just in general, he was pretty aggressive. Like they don't,
Well, it's like
how you did things.
It's like
just
you cover teams year round.
Yeah.
Whether it's JTV, the Brooklyn Exponent,
Yeah.
MLive, WILX, WXYZ. We
Yeah.
show up. We're there. Especially JTV. We're always there.
Everywhere.
And then the state final. Well, Chocolate Milk's in charge of the state final, and one person can get a pass, and you can have 2 bench coaches, and it feels a little bit manufactured. You know what I mean? I love that the kids get to play at Breslin, but there's nothing like a packed high school gymnasium.
Yeah.
There's nothing like that.
You're absolutely right.
So,
and I think about this experience, and it's kind of hard for me not to not get caught up in me in this, because I think when I was a kid growing up, and again, I told I mentioned I lost my father, and so I had a really good middle school teacher, Dennis Olar. Matter of fact, last year when I was athletic administrator of the year for Region 6 and at the conference, and they asked me some questions they read. I referenced Denny Olar, and he lives up in Augrey, lives on a golf course up there, and he used to take me to state finals every year. Like I would go with him and my buddy.
Yeah.
But I was like, everybody else was going with their dad, but Mr. Olar always took me with him.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I'm going, and I think I mentioned to Andy. So we play Ewan-Trout Creek tomorrow night, and one of the most memorable games that I could ever remember was Ewan-Trout Creek and Covert playing in the 1982 state. It was either state semifinal or state final.
Oh, wow.
And Ewan-Trout Creek lost, and it was like, if you love offense and and I do, I love pace of play and getting up and down the floor, and you watch my teams, if we don't have the ball, that must mean we're on defense.
We're gonna have very few sets and we're gonna run.
I stole that from Steve Smoyer, but anyways, one of the most memorable games was that game with Ewan-Trout Creek and Covert, and they had Ewan-Trout Creek had a player named Dave Besseman, and he scored. He's like 5'10", 140 pounds, and scores 39 points and just puts on an absolute show.
Wow.
And it was for me, it was like, hey man, I'm 5 foot nothing, 140 pounds at that time. That was great. That was awesome. And so I go through and I look at Ewan-Trout Creek, and their athletic director is Dave Besseman.
That's amazing.
And he has a freshman daughter on the basketball team.
Oh, no way.
Yep.
And you guys are going head to head?
So I'm going to seek him out.
Oh, for sure.
And I'm going to go up to him and I'm going to tell him what I just said. I'm
Yes.
going to say, you know what? You don't know me from anybody, but I'm gonna tell you, I know who you are.
Oh,
and
that's
why.
incredible.
Yeah.
Before we get you out of here, you've been so good at building and maintaining those relationships. What's your advice just to anyone to not let some of those relationships go and just kind of die off? Because that happens a lot.
Be intentional, man. Like reaching out to, like in my world, man. I got a lot of athletic directors in this area that they're friends.
Yeah.
I sent a message to John Zajac at Tecumseh, Jesse Brown, Mark Ewell, and all 4 of us, because we were all conference together. Mark's daughter plays at DeWitt.
Okay.
John has 2 daughters at Tecumseh, and Jesse's coaching at Lehman.
Sure.
And these guys are, they're friends. I mean, in our world, they're friends. And I, sent out a message, man, good luck to you guys.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing. It's the camaraderie.
Yeah.
And that's how, my relationship with JTV, with Noah and Austin. And Austin was, I actually kind of recommended it because I knew he wanted to go in this. He was interested. I go, hey, I said, let me reach out to JTV.
Oh, that's awesome.
And he came over as a high school student.
Yeah.
Then he went to college, and then he came back, and now he's, whatever.
Thank you for that. Do not mention his middle school game. I told him today, do not mention it.
We're not talking about it.
We're not talking about it.
All right, we're not talking about
Do
it.
not
I'm going to
talk
need
about
those
it.
details.
He's a great
Apparently, he had a good game
But
or
that's the
something.
thing, though. It's about, it goes back to, relationships.
Yeah.
And my relationship with you helped get him an opportunity, and now he's thriving.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And I think that's what I think that's what I enjoy the most.
Yeah.
Because Steve Boyle, the captain. I worked some games with him back in the day, and him and Brian Haynes. Those guys they've been my friends for years.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I enjoy most. Is just when you see them, you just go up and have a conversation with them and how you do. You might not see them for 6 months or a year or 2 years or 3 years or whatever, but you keep those ties.
So, Matt, one of the reasons why Andy and I started doing the Monday Mornings podcast is, and we've seen you several Monday mornings on the show, is we just get a blurb of your greatness and your excitement and your energy. And so we wanted more of that. So we thank you for coming in today.
Thank you.
And Andy and I always like to reflect on the nuggets that we walk away with, and hopefully that our listeners and viewers are getting. And mine is that kindness is not weakness. Don't mistake it for that. I love that.
I like that. You both had a good one today. What was your other one you said? That you had?
Unspoken expectations is equals premeditated resentment.
How many unspoken expectations do we all have of
my
people
gosh.
that have no idea what we are thinking?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad to know you, and I'm glad you made the time today. I know you're a super busy guy. Thanks so much for
Thanks for
being
having
with
me.
us.
This was fun.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank
good
you.
luck.
Yeah,
you.
good luck. That's Matt Lehman, and this is the Monday Mornings Podcast presented by Southern Michigan Bank and Trust. This was kind of a different guest for us, kind of a little bit outside of the box for, I think, maybe how we were going to go with the podcast. But I thought it was important to have some authentic realness, small town America on the show.
Well, the whole idea is to get perspectives from industry leader, and Matt is an industry leader in the industry, just happens to be education and everything that goes along with it. So I find myself once again inspired to do better, to communicate better, and just dig in. And what did he say? When we
Kindness is not weakness.
Yeah, I loved that. But he said something about when I asked him, how do you keep yourself motivated? How do you keep yourself going? And he mentioned something just about he always hungers for more knowledge.
Growing mindset, growth mindset.
Growth mindset.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it was. So I'm inspired. I'm going to work on my growth mindset moving forward.
I like that. I am going to just work on reaching out to people too. Like he's been
Yes.
able to maintain so many relationships
Yes.
over the course of 30 or 40 years.
Yeah.
I go back and reach out to some of those people that have impacted me. You know what I mean?
You know, it's crazy. He remembered that guy that played in that game in 1982 that happens to be a superintendent that they're going to play this week, which is crazy, ironic. But imagine how that guy's going to feel. It's
going to be cool.
When this kid that was sitting in the stands taps on his shoulder and says, hey, I remember you from 1982. So great, intentional guy, so inspiring. And I'm excited that our viewers got to hear that.
Yeah, me too. I want to thank all of our sponsors, especially Southern Michigan Bank and Trust. Cheers to you. We'd also like to thank Partners Bulk Logistics, Barker Weber Insurance Agency, Leave It to Beavers Auto Detailing, and Printer Source Plus. Thanks to Matt Lehman. Jennifer, we'll see you next time on the Monday Mornings Pod.
Bye-bye.